Donald Trump shocked Europeans with his decision on Ukraine. As reported, after seeing the shelling of Ukrainian cities by Russians on July 11, Donald Trump himself called Friedrich Mertz in the middle of the night and offered to sell to Ukraine. Not 2, but 5 Patriots. It was the news about the new shellings, as they say in the White House, that prompted Trump to urgently mobilize the Europeans and give them the green light to purchase a large amount of American weapons for Ukraine. Moreover, in the United States Senate, they hinted that if Putin does not go for peace within 50 days, Russia could face the same fate as Iran. They say it's not for nothing that the Americans are preparing sanctions against their partner in Russia to drive him into isolation. And Germany is allegedly buying launchers from the United States to fire Tomahawk missiles. But that's still far from everything. My name is Alexei Pichi. Today is July 16th on the calendar. Let's go through everything step by step. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, leave any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. So, Segodnya writes that after the massive Russian attack on Ukrainian cities on July 11, Donald Trump urgently called the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Mertz, and suggested that he buy more weapons for Ukraine. First and foremost, Patriot systems. Moreover, Trump blurted out the following to Friedrich Mertz: "You wanted to buy 2 Patriot batteries for Ukraine, I'm ready to sell 5. Most likely, this refers to the shelling of the maternity hospital in Kharkiv and the residential building in Kherson on July 11, when a 1-year-old child was killed, which, I remind you, made it to the front page of the New York Post at the time, a newspaper actively read by Donald Trump himself and his wife Melania Trump. It's well known that the New York Post is actually the favorite newspaper of the Trump family. And back then, the front page featured news about how Russians shelled a maternity hospital in Kharkiv and a residential building in Kherson. But the most important role in this story was played by Friedrich Mertz himself. As it is written, Mertz was surprised by Trump's call. The sale of Patriot systems to Ukraine was discussed a week prior. And although Trump was disappointed with Putin, he did not give approval for the sale of the systems. Mertz had already started thinking that breaking through the wall would be nearly impossible and was considering alternative ideas. But this time Trump called himself and said, "I'm ready to do it." He offered 5 Patriot batteries for Ukraine immediately, with the sole condition that the United States would sell, not donate, the batteries to Ukraine. But here it's important to understand that Trump's decision was preceded by long months of diplomacy and persuasion. European officials were counting on the members of Trump's team who sympathized with Ukraine. United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. You heard correctly. The Europeans consider Scott Bessent to be sympathetic to Ukraine. It seems there's still some information that hasn't been made public, suggesting we may not have the full story yet. The Vice-Chancellor of Germany, Lars Klingbeil, and the co-chairman of the Social Democratic Party after Scholz met with Scott Bessent. He promised to lobby Trump on both sanctions and arms supplies to Ukraine. As the publication writes, it turned out to be easier for Mertz to establish contact with Trump than it was for previous German leaders. And before returning to politics in 2018, Mertz actually made a fortune of millions as a legal and financial consultant for leading German companies. Mertz also pilots his own plane. You know, that's a personal trait that Trump likes. And let me remind you that at one time, Friedrich Mertz was actually on the board of directors of the tech giant Bosch, the international auditor, Ernst & Young, and the football club Borussia Dortmund. And that's just part of his track record. So like Trump, he knows how to make deals. The factor that allowed Mertz to secure the purchase of weapons from the United States was a constitutional reform that he carried out even before taking office as chancellor, which loosened the debt brake rules and allowed Germany to borrow 500 billion euros until 2035. And this was Mertz's historic decision, which is only now bearing fruit. Back then, many people said this was completely unclear. But if it weren't for this decision to actually raise the national debt ceiling, Mertz wouldn't be able to make purchases now. Patriots for Ukraine? As the quote says, Mertz has found the right approach. Now he can call Trump on his mobile phone and use so-called checkbook diplomacy. Unlike Macron and others, he not only talks but also offers Trump money. When Mertz learned about the suspension of aid to Ukraine 2 weeks ago, he requested an urgent conversation with Trump. The conversation took place on July 3rd, the same day Trump last spoke with Putin. And Mertz, as he writes, immediately made Trump see reason, saying, "Who are you even listening to? Putin is deceiving you. Just look at the shelling of Ukrainian cities." But understanding Trump's nature, Mertz immediately offered money and said, "Since you stopped supplying weapons to Ukraine, then sell them not to Ukraine, but to Germany. 2 Patriots, Germany will pay for them, and after that it's our personal business with the Ukrainians what happens next." And here is the next quote. At that time, United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth joined the call. At that moment, it appeared Trump was unaware of the decision to suspend the aid. He asked Pitt, "What's going on?" Days later, the Pentagon resumed deliveries. On July 3rd, Trump did not approve the sale of the systems. But after seeing the bombings in Ukraine on July 11th, Trump remembered Mertz's appeals and immediately picked up the phone to call Mertz and offer a deal to buy Patriots for Ukraine. Mertz immediately agreed. Germany reportedly will likely send Ukraine 2 of its own existing Patriot systems and order replacements from the United States of America. Norway is also planning to buy another Patriot for Ukraine. Canada, Denmark and Finland are ready to jointly invest in at least 2 more systems. In total, Ukraine can now receive at least 5 Patriot batteries. In part 2 of the program, I will include an additional news item. Russian President Vladimir Putin should take seriously the call from American President Donald Trump to stop the war in Ukraine within 50 days. If not, he risks facing the same fate as Iran, defeated by Israel and the United States. This follows from a post by American Senator and author of the law on crushing sanctions against Russia, Lindsey Graham. And now I'll quote him. If Putin and others are wondering what will happen on the 51st day, that is, the day after Trump's ultimatum ends, I would advise them to ask Ayatollah, that is, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. If I were a country buying cheap Russian oil and supporting Putin's war machine, I would take President Trump at his word. Graham also called Trump's statement about upcoming deliveries of American weapons to Kyiv, which will be funded by European Union countries, good news. The aid package will include Patriot missile defense systems, the number of which could reach 17 units. However, this likely refers to launchers, installations, missiles, and ammunition. The day before, Trump noted that the promised Patriot missiles have already started arriving in Ukraine from Germany. They're not just on the way, some of them are already in Ukraine. So on that note, I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions in the comments, subscribe, hit the bell, and like the video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Bye, everyone. Subtitles created by